Alrighty, kia ora and hello. Thank you everybody for joining us today for the panel discussion with some incredibly talented youth writers. I have read their stories. They are absolutely phenomenal. This is one of many events that make up the 2023 Online Festival of Flash, which is all a part of the National Flash Fiction Day. And these events have spanned this weekend and last weekend. And finally, the winners of all the Flash competitions will be announced locally all around New Zealand on June 22nd, which, might just be National Flash Fiction Day. So my name is Joy. I'm the very lucky host for the discussion today. My pronouns are she, they, and I am a contributing editor for the Fingers, Toes Journal. I am currently a rising third-year student at Duke University in the US, but I was born and raised in Auckland. Joining me from all over the world includes Bram, whose work was selected as part of the Dunedin Ekphrastic Writing Series, Maggie, whose work was longlisted in an NFFD youth competition, and of course, Ella and Kate, whose works were shortlisted. To the audience out there, I am super happy to take any questions from y'all. If you put them in chat, I will try my best to get to them as time allows. But that's enough from me for an intro. I'm going to let the writers talk. So if each of you guys would like to introduce yourself with your names, pronouns, where you're from, anything else you want to add, plus read the story that you've chosen to share with us. So let's start off with Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm 18 years old. I'm a recent high school graduate, which is still really weird for me to say. That was last month. I'm currently in Seoul, South Korea, but I was born in New York. I moved here when I was pretty young. I've been here most of my life. Yeah, my pronouns are she, her. Should I just jump right into reading my story?
Yeah,
Okay.
Go for it.
So I chose a piece called Mother to read for you guys, and I guess I'll just get right into it. She said sharp instead of hashtag. She avoided arguing like the plague, which sucked for her whenever arguing became a necessity because she was terrible at it. She would stammer and lose her train of thought, and often her voice would come out whiny. She could never deliver the cuttingly witty and scathing lines that the heroines of her novels were always shooting like sharp flame from their tongues. Her gaze fell to the ground in between dialogue. You could watch as she retreated into herself, and it was obvious when she remembered herself again. Her eyes would snap to yours with the startled, guilty, disappointed shiver of a candle flame that had come frighteningly close to being blown free. There was a sense that she was a thing that ran in the veins of the brown leaves underfoot, life worn ragged by too many passing acts.
Thank you so much, Kate. How about Maggie next?
Hi, I'm Maggie. I was born and raised in New Zealand. I'm still in New Zealand. I'm also 18 and recently graduated from high school, and my pronouns are she, her. And my story is called Cherry Red. Dahlia stands with him on the street corner under pooling yellow light. She stomps powdered snow off her boots and pulls her scarf tighter around her body. Her nose is red. She scrunches it and he laughs, musky warm. You remember his laugh and his hand large in yours, how his eyes were soft like chocolate, his words sweet as honey, when they curled around tender flesh, aching warm. He wraps a calloused hand behind her neck and breathes over her nose. She twists a hand around his belt to pull him closer, their foreheads touching. The glow of the streetlight shines through them like they're in a movie. You remember the white stick that dangled from her lips and her cigarette smoke laugh clear as a whisper in your ear. Her eyes shadowed sympathy under wispy black bangs. The soft pop as a lollipop left her mouth, and her wet lips in the light cherry red. She tilts her head and catches your eye over her shoulder. For a second, you stare at one another, caught frozen by the lens of an invisible camera. Then she kisses him, looking at you through her lashes, hand moving to grasp his waist. Her eyes are icicle blue, fallen snow on her lashes, and you can't look away. Clump snow collects on your collar, it melts on your neck and bleeds cold down your back. You wonder if his hand is cold too, if you're feeling what she's feeling, if you're a little bit more like her. She pulls back. Her lipstick is smudged, cherry red. Then she huffs a swirling breath of white steam into his face, and you imagine it's her soul, blooming through his mouth and dripping down his esophagus and twisting in his heart, lungs, his veins, his heart.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. How about Ella next?
Kia ora, I'm Ella. I'm just recovering from a cold, so my voice is kind of croaky. I'm 17. I use any pronouns, and I also live in New Zealand. And My story is called Sand Dragons. Mog stares out the window at the swirling sandstorm and thinks about the stories her mother told about dragons. They used to breathe fire, she would say. Mog sometimes wishes that she could breathe fire, but she also knows that it would be a pretty heavy burden to carry if one little self-indulgent laugh exploded her whole world. Last night, she watched a planet go supernova and hoped that it wasn't some poor dragon's fault. When they went walking, her mom called the sand that careened into their bare ankles dragons. Mog sometimes got confused about how sand was supposed to breathe fire, but when she got older, she realized her mom was really just talking about dragons to distract Mog from the pain. Mog stares out the window at the swirling dragons and thinks about sand. There's enough of it to swallow someone whole. Mog could have loved a grain of sand forever and not missed it if it disappeared one day. Sand can tell stories about dragons, but Mog can't not miss her mother. In her mind's eye, Mog opens the door and breathes fire into the screaming void. She watches as everything ignites. She hopes that watching her home go supernova is a better distraction from someone else's pain than thinking about dragons. She hopes that nobody survives only to wake up and be missing their mother. Mog steps outside into the swirling sandstorm and becomes the stories her mother told about dragons.
Thank you so much, Ella. And last but not least, Bram.
Kia ora, everybody. My name is Bram. I'm 17 years old and not a high school graduate yet, unfortunately. Born and raised in Dunedin, New Zealand. I use he, him pronouns. And the story that I have to share today is called Tightrope, and it is part of the Dunedin ekphrastic. Is that the word? I do not know the word ekphrastic. I'm going to say ekphrastic series. So it's inspired by the painting by Ewan McDougall, Bloody Circus IV. And it is, tightrope. Walk the tightrope over the bloody circus. See the maidens swinging from their platforms, the lashed tigers stalking circles. The crowds rush in with their jellied fruits and bated breaths like innards from an axe's trail, just in time for the fire breather and the sunken green glow of her torch. The puppet master cuts your velvet rope and you fall like a brick from a skyscraper, the ceiling receding from view all the while into the limelight. The ringmaster sizes you up and the sirens cackle and clack their nails. No revolt for the people. They need only blood and circuses.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for sharing. I think we really started off with this panel with such a bang. We'll move on to a couple of moderated discussion questions. So these questions are pretty much positive to all of y'all. Just jump in and say whatever you want at any point. So we just heard some really diverse stories with very different voices. I guess I'm interested to know where each of you draw your inspiration from in your writing. Don't be shy.
I would say that I generally like to write around a theme or a feeling, and then the details sort of come after. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Any
I think that if
specific
you
themes? Oh yeah, go on, Bram.
I think that if you pick something, like you said, like something central, like a feeling or a theme, I think it can even be something as kind of potentially loose as an object or a place. I think, things tend to fill themselves in from there. I think I'm kind of lucky on this question in that I have a painting that I wrote from, so I guess I'm excluded. But yeah, in general, I agree with Maggie.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way. So the story that I just read, that one I actually wrote not at all knowing what I was going to be writing, but I just saw some like autumn leaves. It was fall time. I was taking a walk around my neighborhood, and that just kind of came out. I don't even know where it came from or where I drew the inspiration to create that character, but I kind of think that a lot of the way that my writing works personally is a lot of things that I notice and pick up around me kind of marinate in the back of my head for a really long time. And then they come to the front of my mind whenever I really need them in a piece, which is great for me because that just means they just emerge when I need them the most. At least hopefully so far, that's how it's gone.
I think in Maggie, in the story that you read, I definitely could see how you'd added all those details because it was super like description rich and awesome. But I also could like feel the central emotion and idea. And yeah, just totally agree with that. Like feeling the emotion first and be like, how do I write this down? And then just like finding a context for it and stuff like that. It's definitely part of my process too.
For sure. I think everyone has agreed that there's like some vague emotion that makes you feel something, and then you move on into the storytelling part of it. Is there any sort of like main vibe, emotion, theme that you catch yourself always tending to write about in any way?
I think for me, like all of us are like recently graduated or about to leave high school. So there's a lot about like growing up and that thought of being like alone and things changing is definitely present in a lot of things I write recently. But I don't know about you guys.
I really agree with that, Ella. I think my ways tend to be similar. Also, I really fixate a lot on identity and personality and interpersonal relationships. So going back to what you said, Ella, like how do we change over time, but also how do our relationships with other people change us or how do they evolve? I find that really fascinating. So that's one thing I go back to a lot in my writing.
I would say that I tend to kind of write very escapistly. I often find myself writing things with the kind of central emotion of something euphoric, which I think is useful at high school to have somewhere to go like that. And I often write about religion or mythology, which kind of goes hand in hand with those like kind of big, joyous, strange feelings. So I often find that those work well. But yeah, Euphoria, not the show.
Yeah, I definitely feel like a lot of what everyone's already said, sort of like growing up and a lot of the emotions that you feel as you sort of mature and the things you struggle with, I think are a lot of what I like to write about. But mostly I also like to write about the intenseness of life more. So sort of like what Bram said, more like euphoria. So um, almost like a heightened version of reality instead of just mundanity, if that makes sense.
For sure. Yeah. I think everyone's got some really amazing content that they draw on from their lives, whether it be relationships, whether it be mythology, all these different stories that you guys are coming from. So that's amazing. Cool. Well, the next question is then, what is your creative process? Do you have some specific habits or times where you write, or do you just sit down and write as soon as something pops into your head?
I think this is something I struggled with in the past. I don't know about you guys, but personally, I've always like my biggest writing goal has always been be more disciplined. And so far I haven't been able to stick with it very long. I've had stretches where I do like try and get up at a certain time and write daily, but then that was a bit short-lived, to be honest. I think so far the most consistent trend in my writing habit is just writing when I really feel inspired or really feel the need to jot something down, and then later I'll return to it at a time when I feel like it's matured and marinated a bit, and then I'll like work on it from there. But yeah, I kind of regret to say I don't have a good writing practice that I can really solidly stick to and regularly talk about, but that's something I'm working on.
Each to their own, no worries.
I'm kind of similar to Kate in that I don't have any sort of strict schedule. I often find that if I'm just kind of hit by something, like if something just pops into my brain and I think to myself, I've got to do something with this, then I have like a notebook that I just write it down. And I only have one notebook. Most of my friends that write have like 50, but I just have one. And it's always at like when I'm about to go to bed and I'm like, oh my gosh, if I don't write this down, it's going to be the end of the world. And I just like come back to it the next morning. It's like, what was I thinking? But then 50% of the time it goes somewhere. And I just like, it's often like 3 words and I just write something around that. and then maybe dispose of it or not. Yeah,
Yeah.
mine's also a mess.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the going to bed thing. I have like a lot of ideas where you're like trying to go to sleep and then suddenly you're just seized with inspiration and you just have to get up and then sort of like wake yourself up and write down the thing. This story that I wrote was very undisciplined. I wrote most of it on the bus actually while I was like traveling and
Skills.
yeah, like
I often find myself writing and it's like 11 o'clock at night and I'm sobbing my eyes out and I wake up the next morning and I read it back. I'm like, what's going on in my head? Yeah, I've tried to add structure to my writing, but like Kate said, it just doesn't work out for me because I'm like, if I'm struggling to like get ideas going and it just doesn't, it just feels like a chore. I just kind of write when I want to.
Facts. I really agree with each of y'all as someone who is also a very sporadic writer. And it sounds like all five of us have horrendous sleeping habits as well. So that's always a nice thing to know. But everybody writing like right before they go to sleep or like suddenly waking up going, oh my God, I have an idea. But like, how do you balance that with, being a student and all like the stress and the busyness that comes with that?
I don't know if we do. Like straight up.
Facts.
It's just kind of life throws stuff at you and you kind of just catch where you can. And then when you have a spare moment, maybe you write something down. Or like when you have a spare couple of hours, you spend the whole spare couple of hours writing. I don't know. Like balance is not really a main factor in the student life, I don't think.
Right,
I was gonna say that as well. I don't think I really do balance it. It's mostly, I guess, just thinking a lot while you're walking or when you're just about to go to bed. And then that's when the ideas come, and then taking a lot of notes. And when you have enough time, maybe getting it out and actually making it into something. But yeah.
Honestly, I agree. I don't think that, especially during the school year at least, being a student is so tough because you have so many other responsibilities that you're held to that writing kind of, at least for me, falls to the wayside. But I find a lot of free time during vacations and breaks, like right now, that I really enjoy just spending on writing. But also, like Maggie said, I think one of the best things to do if you're looking for time as a student is just taking advantage of those pockets of time, like riding on the bus. I've done that before too, on the way to school, things like that. So taking advantage of those times, even if you're just like thinking about a story or a piece that you're writing, I think can really help.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, sounds like everyone's a busy girl. I felt that. I feel that for real. But in more back onto the creative process, I got a bit sidetracked there. But how do you approach, I guess, different stages of writing? Do you guys prefer like looking at the blank page and trying to put words down versus editing a piece of writing per se?
For me, it's like writing is so impulsive that it kind of just happens and then sits there for ages. And I'll go back through and read some of my pieces. I'm like, how do I even start to edit this? It's just a mess. So definitely refining my work is something that I often tell myself to work on and never do. I just kind of let it sit there. But yeah.
Yeah. um I don't think I'm as much of an editor as I am like a go through it 2 months later and throw parts of it out type of person, which I guess is editing, but not in the way that you would edit like an essay or whatever. Just in like a oh nope. But I think yeah, that's something that I think I should put time into working on is figuring out how to actually edit like more like quickly after the actual writing of the piece instead of just kind of letting it fester for a bit, which I don't think is always the best way to do it. I don't know.
I think both of you are making me feel very seen right now because that's also me. I'm also a very impulsive writer like Ella, and I tend to write things down and then leave them for ages. Like the piece I read at the start, even my other piece that I submitted for this, were all like spur of the moment pieces, and then I looked at them again very like many months later. And so I think that for me, I'm really more drawn to the blank page because there's so much more possibility. And revision for me is tough because I am not a person with a lot of patience. And I think revision really requires that patience and tenacity, which I need to build. Yeah, so that's something that, again, going back to discipline, I would like to incorporate a little more structure and discipline to that process because right now it's very random.
Yeah, actually, on this, I would say I'm different from what you guys have said. I actually edit a lot. Like as I'm writing, I'm constantly editing. Most of the times, my first drafts are really, really bad. But it also might have to do with the fact that I don't write short pieces that much. I like to write a little bit longer pieces more. And I would say the part I enjoy the most is like at the really end when you actually got there, where you actually like sort of achieved what you had in mind when you were trying to write it. And for me, I need to edit it a lot as I go to even get close to that. So I'm like always editing. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm super glad Kate, Ella, and Bram had some solidarity in their impulse writings, and Maggie's out here being our editing queen. I love that. But definitely, what is then your drafting process? What's in between like the blank page and then getting to the end point for y'all?
I think for me, it varies by like the piece I'm writing. Sometimes I'm just struck with like I'm seized with inspiration, so I just write something down very quickly. Like I just dash it out. Other times I have an idea that's just been circulating in my head for a really long time, so I put a lot more thought into shaping that when I approach the blank page. I also like to write in a lot of different genres, so I think it varies by that also, because if it's a longer piece, like Maggie was sort of talking about, it's a very different process for me. So it's hard to say. I don't think I have a consistent approach to it because it's so different by what it is I'm writing.
A blank page is like terrifying to me. So I just kind of write as fast as I can. And then, yeah, I leave it. I write lots and then I leave it and then I come back and I chop bits away, like Bram was saying. And like, that's just the process. That's just how it has to go for me because I can't sit there with nothing on the paper. I just can't do it.
Okay. Okay. I don't know if one of you wanted to say anything. Yeah, go. Go on.
Okay, sure. I was just checking. I often find that it just like takes me so long to kind of lengthen something out. Like I'll have like a couple lines or like a stanza that's kind of like the thesis statement of the piece, I guess. And then the trick, the problem, like most of the process is getting into something that's not just the thesis statement. Having, I don't know, literally any expansion on the start of it, I often find is difficult because I like once I have kind of got what I consider to be the core of it, I'm like, phew, now that's done. And then it's just not. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I find that to be the hardest part, which is embarrassing because it's the main part. But yeah.
Yeah, I would say I actually start with like a lot of drafts, like words sometimes. And then slowly over like the next couple days or so, I start to build more of a picture in my head. And then it comes out in writing as in like little sections and some like skeleton structure of what the main like plot is going to be, I guess. Although you don't really have a plot with something this small. And slowly it just sort of builds up and then a lot of chopping away and stuff like that as well. Yeah.
Oh, good to know. So we've sort of gotten there where real guys are like, oh, if something doesn't work, I kind of just chop it out. Is that generally everyone's approach to editing if something isn't working? So there's just delete, you hit the delete button, or do you rewrite, or do you sort of repurpose it into something else?
I think for me, like Ella is afraid of the blank page. I'm afraid of deleting things because I second guess myself all the time. I think at first, oh, this really doesn't work, but I'm like, but maybe it will. So what I tend to do is I delete something and then I add it back as like a comment on a Google Doc over that section just to make
Love
sure
it.
I don't lose it completely. But then I tend to like rewrite it and then usually it goes, which is good. But it's for my own like security of like feeling that sense of I can always go back to it, that I always just keep it there in some way, form.
Yeah, I definitely get that. Although what I tend to do is I tend to make like different versions. So I have draft version and then version 1, and then I rewrite
Mhm.
time. And then it gets a bit chaotic when you get to like version 4 or something. And then you have like notes in every version, and you sort of have to like look through them to find the one that you were looking for. But yeah, I would say generally I go from small and then I try to write as much as possible. And then after I have everything I sort of need, I start chopping. Yeah.
For me, it depends a lot on the form. Like for short stories in Flash, it's like just getting everything on there and then chopping it away. But I have like poetry documents that are called no deleting, and I'm just not allowed to delete anything because I always feel like it's bad, and then it turns out it's not. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of glad I didn't delete that. And yeah, like Maggie was saying, if I'm writing anything longer, I've got like 10 drafts of a longer story just sitting in my Google Docs. And yeah, it just really depends.
I'm a repurposer. If I don't like something in a piece, but I like it as like a piece of writing, I have this great big document that's just bits of things that didn't work out. And I'm so determined to make work somewhere. Because like sometimes you write something and it's like, oh, that's beautiful, but what are you doing here? And in that document, I have like a bunch of like titles that I want to use. Because I always like come up with titles first, which I know is like a major controversial thing, but I'm a titles first person. So yeah, I have titles that didn't work somewhere, and I have lines that didn't work somewhere. And every so often I just go through and like see what I can pick out. It's like op shopping. I don't know. Like, what can I get out of this? How can I make this better? So I think that works. It works for me. I don't know.
If it works for you, it works. Hell yeah. Amazing. Love that most of you guys are also a little bit delete hesitant like me. I feel very represented right now. But we're starting to talk about like different forms that you guys have been writing in. So what drew you guys specifically to flash fiction? And I guess for Bram, kind of ekphrastic flash fiction. And also, is there like another form that you're interested or familiar with? And do you feel like there are any key similarities or differences?
Okay, I'll jump. Oh wait. Okay. Um, um, so I mostly write, I guess you could call it like short form prose. I'm hesitant to call it poetry because I think poetry has connotations of rhyming and structure, and I can't do either of those things. Um, so let's call it short form prose. But flash fiction and I guess topically micro fiction is appealing to me because it's like if you have a little like a pearl little concept, it just kind of you just write it down, you kind of extend it a little bit, and then you're there. And then you've got a flash, you've got a micro, you're good, you're set. It's kind of you can compress as much as you want into this tiny little tiny thing. And it's like a challenge because you have to get it down to that level, but it's also a blessing because you don't have to get it beyond that. But yeah, mostly like short things because I'm not good at committing to write anything longer. Um, I think the longest thing I have is probably like 3 pages, maybe 2. So I'm
Felt
not
that.
a short story person at all. I don't know.
I would say, well, when I first started writing, when I was really young, I've always wanted to write stories. And the first thing I tried to write was a 4-book like series, which is definitely not a good idea. So, well, it turned out like awful and the plot was all over the place. And I was like 11 years old. Um, and so as I got older, so then I sort of stopped writing after that because I was like, I don't know how to do this. And then I sort of became more acquainted with like shorter form. And I was like, oh, this is probably where I should start instead of jumping into a 4-book series. So yeah, I really enjoyed, like, I think it's a really good way to like practice writing and to really like capture emotion. And it's a lot, like sort of Bram said, it's both a challenge, but it's also a lot easier because you can be done with something and it won't take you like 5 years. um, and yeah, but right now I'm working on something that's like 5,000 words long. So I would say generally I'm more drawn towards longer stuff, but I really do enjoy short fiction as well. It's a very different experience.
I'm like kind of similar where I started off being like, oh yeah, I'm gonna write novels, I'm gonna write series, and I was like 11 and 12, and it just felt like such a good idea at the time, but it's totally not. And it kind of just like really put me off writing for ages. Um, but then I got back into writing like shorter form, like Bram's talking about, and it's just so like easy and accessible to form your ideas and make it feel like you've turned it into something that other people can also take in, which I think is like a really nice way to like approach writing. If I'm writing like a poem or something, I'm like, oh, I'm feeling this emotion and I want other people to know that as well. So I'm going to write it into a poem instead of like trying to put it into like a book that's 10,000 words long and you don't, I mean, a book's longer than 10,000 words, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all of you. I think Flash and poetry is just kind of similar in that it's like a very good exercise in brevity and feeling in a really tight, compact space. I'm drawn to that for the reasons that you guys already talked about. I actually tend to write all over the place. I have no particular form I'm most drawn to. So I've dabbled in like novels, plays, poetry. I'm trying to get into creative nonfiction right now, which is harder than I thought it would be. But yeah, I think it's really nice to return to Flash because there's sometimes little bits of ideas that are floating around my head that just have no place in a longer work where I can't really quite expand it to fill up the space that would be required of like a short story or a novel, but I really feel the need to put it out there and shape it in some way. So Flash is a great way to pack it into something that's really nice and neat and full. I think the nice thing about Flash is because it's so short, you can put so much into it without making it burst open, if it makes sense. So it doesn't have to be like overflowing, but it's really nice to like have the challenge, like Brand said, of trying to make it nice and neat and compact in that way.
Yeah, amazing. I love that everyone has sort of acknowledged that Flash is simultaneously kind of really difficult, but also an easier thing to commit to. So that's always a nice thing to know. But I think definitely all 4 of your stories focus on moments really well. So like things are really short. So your writing is so vivid. And especially as a reader, I feel like I'm really close to the scene or the subject matter. I guess, do you want to speak on how you managed to hone like specific techniques or devices or imagery and stuff to make your writing so like powerful and resonate with the reader in like less than a couple hundred words?
I like struggle to articulate myself concisely a lot of the time. So um yeah, it was definitely a challenge, but I just had in my head that I wanted to write about an alien. And I didn't know where that was gonna go. Um but yeah, it just kind of felt like a form where I could focus on like you guys, I think it was Maggie who was talking about focusing less on like mundanity and more on like big emotions. Maggie and Bram were both mentioning that, but I quite like bringing it back into like a mundane moment where there is like room for those bigger emotions and stuff like that. So I guess that's kind of where it came from, and like just trying to write into that like mundane moment where something big happens as like an aside kind of. I don't know.
For sure.
I think in terms of making imagery and descriptions stick, I start with a list of things like feelings that I want to incorporate or express either directly or not. It could be a specific emotion I'd felt or something that had happened to me or something someone told me about. And if I'm struggling with kind of how to describe that literally, I make a Pinterest board, which is
Facts.
I love Pinterest. Pinterest is the ultimate tool, no matter who you are. You don't even have to like, so I'll look for anything that seems vaguely related to the vibe. You put it all together, and eventually it's like, oh, well, how would I describe this? How would I describe this? How would I describe this? And then, oh, look, I've just described all those things. I can now describe what I want to describe. But yeah, it never looks cohesive, the board, but it always works. It's the trick in the book. I don't know.
I really love that idea. I've never tried to make a Pinterest board for my writing, but I think I now have to. Um, I think I'm a lot like Ella in that I'm drawn to the mundane moments and trying to like tap into what's really special about them. So in terms of like how do you make such a small piece, like technically how to make such a small piece and pack it with so much like emotion and vivid description and feeling. I think because you're working such a limited landscape, it's easier to like look at the structure of the piece, like varying the sentence lengths and using really careful punctuation because that's such a powerful tool in that small of a work. So that's something I tend to focus on a lot when I'm writing something as short as that. Yeah, but I really like the idea of focusing on imagery in that way, like looking at a concrete Pinterest board, because you also get like the vibe of the piece from that, not just looking at the particular images. So that is a fantastic idea.
Yeah, I would say I also really like images in terms of like when I'm thinking about the mood of a scene, it's just like it's very visual for me, especially when it's a really strong emotion. Um, and I would say I actually like flash fiction in a way because you can really focus it on one singular moment. And it's almost like you can do that more than in a long piece. So you can like explore every like cranny of that second, if that makes sense. And I guess that also makes it a lot more vivid because you're exploring it so deeply. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the focus on moments, and y'all giving me some real tips on my own writing out here. I love the Pinterest board. That's so smart. Um, okay, so we have like a couple of ex-10-year-old ambition novelist queens out here. So I guess I want to circle back to that. When did you guys first start writing, and how did it all get started?
Okay, Bram, I have a question for you. I used to live in Dunedin, and the Dunedin City Libraries used to run little writing competitions every year. Did you ever enter those?
Oh my God, I did. Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Okay. Memory unlocked. Absolutely.
I used
Um,
to, that's kind of how I got into it as well. I wrote a story about my dog and it got highly commended. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. I want to keep doing this forever. Yeah.
how did I forget about those? Those were so good. Yes, no. I kind of don't remember when I started writing. Like it just kind of happened at some point when I was little. Like started writing seriously, I would say at the end of intermediate, like when I started high school. But I kind of there were like a couple steps. I think during intermediate, I was in this like writing program, and I honestly probably wrote more than I do now in terms of like frequency. Because it was just like all and then we had sessions all the time and it was just like right. That was helpful. But then it was just like kind of mindless, thoughtless, whatever. And then high school, kind of hits you with the giant emotional baseball bat. And then I started writing about everything like that. But oh my God, the library competitions, those were so good. I don't think I ever won anything, but they were fun.
I think for me, it started because I really loved reading as a kid. And so naturally, my next step was like, I want to write something that other people would read. So the fun thing is, I actually just moved very recently. And as I was going through all my stuff to pack it up, I found like a bunch of very old little kid notebooks in which I had written down all kinds of kind of insane things. So like Ella and Maggie, I was one of those kids who was like, I want to write novels because that's all I'd really read as a kid. But then unlike Maggie, and I don't know about Ella, but unlike Maggie, who wanted to write a 4-part book series, I just had like 10,000 ideas for different novels I wanted to write. I started every one of them and never got further than like 3 pages, maybe. So I got to look back on all of those recently, which is really fun. I think that's how it started. I also, like Bram, don't quite remember exactly like a starting moment like Ella has, but I think that's sort of where it emerged.
Yeah, I would say I began when I was like quite small, like sort of like Kate said, because I read a lot as a kid. I just wanted to write stuff as well. And also I made like a lot of picture books when I was young. And my younger brother, who's like 4 years younger than me, just they were so bad, but he thought they were so cool. And it just like really motivated me. And then when I was in intermediate school, I like also joined this writing thing, and then we submitted our work to competitions, but I never really won anything. And my ideas back then were like really weird. They were just really strange things that I wrote about. And then I didn't actually start writing seriously. Like I sort of just stopped. And then I started writing seriously about like a year or two ago, actually. And then I sort of got back into it, which was really nice.
Love it. Strange is good. I think strange kids always have the best ideas in there deep down. I love that you two bonded over the Dunedin writing competitions. That's so cute. I think that's a core memory for y'all now. But I think Kate and Maggie mentioned just now reading a lot as a kid and then being like, I want to try this. I want to do a lot of writing. So do you guys have like favorite books, authors, or even like music or works of art that you think have influenced how you write?
Oh, baby. Oh, do we? Um, so I was
I'm
also a
excited.
reading kid, but y'all with these novels, that is still so insane to me. I was never like a novel attempt writing person. Um, Let me consult my bookshelf that's 5 minutes away from me. I think that
Give
like,
us a view.
oh my God, no, because it's like it's in my closet. No. I think the writer that I have the most of is probably Elif Shafak. She is this Turkish writer, and she wrote The Island of Missing Trees, which is my favorite, one of the ones that I have. And it's about life and this family that's Cypriot. It's like the division between Greek and Turkish Cyprus. And I think she's my most frequent writer over there. But I also love the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series, if anyone knows that. That one changed me, I think. But yeah, I'm not a quick reader. Like I have this friend who reads like hundreds of books a year and I can't keep up with him. But I think I enjoy what I read more than he does because I'm not worried about how quickly I'm going. I don't know.
Facts.
Yeah. So read slower because it's nice.
Kind of topical if we're talking about music. Today is the birthday for Melodrama by Lorde. I like her albums influenced me so much like when they came out because that was kind of the first music that I would listen to and the people in my house would like enjoy. Like they didn't like Katy Perry or anything like that. They liked Lorde though. So we could listen to that and I would like pore over the CD booklet and read all the lyrics and be like, oh my God, I don't understand half of these, but they were so good to like I was like, I want to write like that. And then I'd go away and write in my notebook and I'd come back and read them now. I'm like, what was going on here? Um, but also books. I've got The Traveling Restaurant by Barbara Else was like,
Love that book.
yeah, big part of my childhood, kind of like getting into literature and stuff like that. I don't know. Yeah.
I think I also relate a lot to the idea of being drawn to songs that are very like story, and because Lord is such a great writer of lyrics, like it's incredible how she does it. But I'm also very drawn to similar artists. I mean, any song that has a very defined story or really beautiful lyrics are ones that I tend to listen to most. So everything from like Lord to Taylor Swift to like 70s and 80s classic rock for some reason does this really well. Like if you ever listen to Billy Joel, he's fantastic at it. So those are the music genres or lyrics forms that I'm really drawn to for inspiration. And I think that sort of seeps into my work subconsciously. Just this affinity for wordplay because songwriting is so much about wordplay. In terms of books and literature, I wish I had a better answer for this, but I feel like having read so much over my life, it's really hard for me to pick out any particular influences on my style. Like it's kind of all mashed together. I will say like one book I read really recently that I loved a lot, which I don't know if it's had a significant impact on my writing style, but it's something I really hope to emulate is I don't know if you guys know The Sentence by Louise Erdrich, but it's a great novel. It's set in the pandemic, actually, so pretty recent. Yeah, and it's like a Native American story character. It's about a bookstore owner slash worker, which is great if you love books. And it was just it was paranormal, it was real, it was sort of mythological. It was very cool. But the style was also like so sharp and wonderful. So if you all need a reading rack, there you go.
I would say when I was young, my favorite thing were like the series that never ended, like those really massively long series, which probably influenced why I wanted to write such long things when I was so young. But I really liked fantasy, like Tamora Pierce and like if you guys know Ranger's Apprentice. But as I got older, my writing style is actually quite different from what I think of as like my favorite books. But I do really like The Kite Runner, like the sort of feeling of it. It feels like, yeah, it's like bittersweet, I think. And I think that like really influenced my writing style. I really like to capture those sort of like sad, but also beautiful, but also I guess sort of happy emotions.
Y'all have great book taste. I'm gonna put that out there. This was like a good list of reading recs for me, TBH. That was great. Bram, did you want to add something?
Yeah, the melodrama inspiration is so real. I think Lord is truly just the pride of Aotearoa. Like she's so what an icon actually. I totally forgot it was Melodrama's birthday. I should know that. I think that Ribs has the Ribs as the song has like the biggest chokehold in our generation. Like I don't know another song that encapsulates so much teenageness in it. I think I'm Kate. You mentioned Taylor Swift. Thank you so much. For real. Another like I think artist that I think is helpful for micros is Mitski because her songs are so like she has relatively short songs and she just expresses so much emotion in such a short space of time, and that is just so mind-blowing. She's incredible. Yes, I kind of try to write like she does. That's kind of what I would say.
Absolutely. I feel like Lord drops an album at every pivotal moment of my life. And I'm like, how do you know? How does she know? I don't know. I don't know what happens, but Lord comes to save the day. Anyway, I guess one more question. How do you handle writer's block if it comes up for you? Are there any like strategies or ways you can go back to rely on and get back into the flow? Listening to Lord.
I would say, well, I experienced like massive writer block for about like 5 years between intermediate and like only recently. So I don't really know, but that was sort of like the only bit of writer's block I ever experienced. Like since then, it hasn't really come back. But I would say what helps me is having like a lot of different ideas that I'm working on, or at least having like a list of things that I know I want to write about, and sort of having like shorter stuff, longer stuff, like something in between. And so you never really feel too overwhelmed by anything you're doing at the particular moment. Yeah.
I agree with Maggie's advice about having lots of things going on at once. I tend to have a lot of things going on at once too, and it helps because you can switch between it if one gets a little too boring or overwhelming at one point. Another thing I heard someone else suggest, and which I found it kind of helpful, is if you like step away from the creative writing for a second and just write anything. Like you can write about why you feel stuck in writing, or like write about everything that's going wrong with the piece you're currently working on. Just anything you can, any words that you can get out of your head, just write it down. And that kind of like it kind of unblocks it down a bit, even if you're not writing what you really intended to write when you sat down at your desk. It's something, and it usually kind of, I don't know, it sparks something in your head and it gets you to a path where you can go back to the writing that you were like originally intending to set out to do.
I think that when I encounter writer's block, the most useful kind of strategy that I've figured out is I just carry on with my life, and I find that usually something just undoes it. It'll be something that one of my friends says, or something that I see when I'm walking somewhere, and it's like, oh my God, that's it. And then, yeah, I just find that there's like maybe a handful of moments like that in a day or a week that just kind of set something off that can undo writer's block if it's there. Otherwise, it's just nice.
Yeah, I'm totally the same as that. It's like I can sit down and intend to write something and get nothing done, and then I can come back 5 days later after having like a bunch of those moments and just have so many words on the page, or just like refine a really good piece or something like that. Like it's super impulsive and dependent on inspiration, but it like I just have to trust that it will come back.
Sure. I think the general consensus is take a break from writing for a second and just trust that it comes back. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I said one more question, but I want to ask one more. So any advice that you guys would give to a younger version of yourself, or any like young writers who are just starting off their foray into writing?
I would probably just tell them to do it for themselves and do it for fun. Because when I you get caught up in competitions and publishing online and stuff like that, but that's totally not the point. The point is just to have fun and like just write and write and write until like you feel satisfied and you feel like that's what you want to do.
I would say try different things. Don't tie yourself down to writing novels just because that's what you've read the most. And also don't feel so discouraged if you think your writing's bad. Like keep writing. Don't let that stop you from writing. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I think especially what Maggie said about trying lots of different things, that was one of my pieces of advice I would give to anybody who's looking to write at a younger age, is just experiment a lot. Not just in different genres, but different tones of voice, and read a lot and try to emulate other people who you read. Not just because you want to be like them, but just because you want to see, like, can I fit into that style and tone of voice, and what can I make that works for me? I think also like take advantage of all the time you have as a kid or in your younger years, when you're not burdened by all the like college applications and extracurriculars of high school. I think that because when I was younger, I spent a lot of my free time just writing and reading a lot. That's really helped me so much because I got so much time to just play around and experiment and figure out what I wanted to do with it. So that was just really advantageous for me.
I would say, kind of in the same vein as Maggie's, to To write broadly, my friend group had this thing that we do where we just give each other a handful of words and we have to write something from that. Just try something you haven't written about before. I know it might make you annoyed or upset, but write about something random, and write as yourself. Don't turn your writing voice into somebody else's because you think it'll be more attractive or more exciting or more whatever. Just write with your own voice, because at the end of the day, that is what people will enjoy the most because it's you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for some very insightful advice. I think that's really helpful for people watching us. So I think that was actually a really lovely way to wrap up our discussion. So I hope you all have enjoyed our conversation, learned a thing or two from each other, and enjoyed hearing about how these very excellent writers work and will continue to grow. There's actually one more panel discussion at 2 p.m. New Zealand time, which is visual art and storytelling. So I think that's in 30 minutes if I got my time zones right. So definitely check that out. Otherwise, that's it for today. Thank you, Bram, Maggie, Kate, and Ella for sharing your thoughts, your endless wisdom, and being such lovely company for an hour. And of course, thank you everybody for